webinar is being recorded, and these slides will be posted on the We Honor Veterans resource page. So without further ado, we are very happy to be joined here by Timothy Jobin. He is the Deputy Director of the VA Caregiver Support Program. So I will hand it over to him.
All right, everyone. Thanks so much for having me on the call today to talk about the Caregiver Support Program. I'll just wait a moment for the slides to come up.
Give me 1 second. My apologies.
All right, there we go. Thank you. Thank you so much. So yeah, so happy to be here with all of you today to talk about the Caregiver Support Program. It's a program that has undergone a lot of change in the last few years. And I think the longer that it goes on, the more applicable it is to hospice and palliative care. So excited to talk with you all today. Really appreciate the opportunity to be on, and I will jump right into the presentation. So next slide. So I think one of the unique things about the VA Caregiver Support Program is that we obviously provide the majority of our care to the caregiver. And so, a veteran, and I'm a veteran personally, and when you're in the DoD, your whole family typically gets care together on a very regular basis. And I think people like that. I mean, now I have care through the VA, but I also have a primary care provider in the community. My whole family goes there. So when I go there, how's your mom? How's your dad doing? And things along those lines. And so one of the really unique perspectives about the Caregiver Support Program is that we actually provide the majority of our services to our caregivers. So our belief and really our mission statement is that if we take really good care of our caregivers, they'll be able to take great care of our veterans in ways that we really can't. And so once again, just to read this, so our mission is to promote the health and well-being of family caregivers who care for our nation's veterans through education, resources, support, and services. So there's many different ways that we do this with numerous different resources. So we'll talk more about that as we get into our presentation. Next slide. So I always like to talk a little bit about the history of the program so individuals know where it came from. This slide just has like most recent history, but I'll go back a little bit farther than that. The program was actually started in 2008. And so veterans, and really how it came about was veterans were coming back, service members were coming back from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and they were really suffering from surviving the wounds of war that they may have not have survived in previous conflicts due to most likely medical enhancements in technology and other things. And so they were coming back, and they were and really their caregivers who was typically a family member, although I use that term really broadly. Their mothers, spouses, siblings, really, really close friends. The list goes on and on. Sometimes children are really kind of giving up their lives to take care of them. And so at that time, the VA really didn't have a mechanism to support them in the way that they wanted to be supported and this kind of support that they needed. And so that was really what the Caregiver Support Program sprang out of. And so in 2010, it was signed into public law. And then in 2011, we started accepting applications. So when the program initially opened, we only served veterans that served on or before or after September 11th, 2001. So our post 9/11 veterans. And so, just being a direct care social worker in the VA and working with that, it was really nice that we had that service for our OEF, OIF veterans, O&D veterans. But as time went on, just personally, I would hear from Vietnam veterans on a very regular basis, World War II veterans on a very regular basis. Wow, we wish we had this program for veterans of all eras. And so under the Mission Act of 2018, and once again, getting into all these acts and political pieces, but I think it's good to know about some of this. It was passed that the program would undergo some changes, but would also serve veterans and caregivers of all eras. So we agreed to do that in a phased approach. And so the first phase of the program, we refer to it as phase 1 expansion, happened on October 1, 2020. And so that was when we began serving veterans that served on or before May 7th, 1975. And so we continued to serve our post 9/11 veterans, but October 1, 2020, we opened the door to veterans that served on or before May 7th, 1975, and that's veterans and their caregivers, actually. So that's our World War II, our Vietnam War veterans, our Korean War veterans. And so just to talk a little bit about the impact of that in regards to, we really count our, lots of times you'll look at consults, and we do use consults in our program, but we really refer to applications on a regular basis. So on a month-by-month basis, before expansion, we were getting, it varied, but approximately 20,000 applications a year, which is still a lot. But when we hit expansion, that first year of expansion, we received about 110,000 applications. So like a 400% increase, a big bolus of interest in the program at that time. And then phase 2, which was our last phase of expansion, and so we are done expanding. This happened about 5 months ago. We opened the program to veterans and caregivers of all eras. So we filled in that donut hole in the middle, which is our Persian Gulf War population, and there's some other eras of veterans in there too. But as of October 1, 2022, the program is open to veterans and caregivers of all eras. PCAFC is open to all populations. So we're excited to do that. And once again, we received a large number of consults and a large number of applications. However, we were a little bit more prepared this time just because we had a little bit more time to stand up the program, and we had all of the experience that we had from October 1, 2020, when we expanded to pre-1975. Next slide. So we always get a lot of questions about eligibility requirements. And so it's hard to always answer specific questions, this veteran or that veteran, but I just want to hit the highlights. And so typically, we're looking at, of course, a veteran, and then we do if service members are undergoing a medical discharge from the armed forces, they're also eligible for the program. So DoD has somewhat of a similar program, not the exact same, but has some similar concepts, and we refer to it as SCADL. It's SCAADL, like any good VA program or DoD program does have an acronym, but service members will usually be in that program first at times, then they'll transition over to us. The individual must have a serious injury. And so that was aggravated in the line of duty. And so just as we talk about that used to be defined in various ways. This was before the Mission Act, and we had to tie program enrollment to their service, but that changed with the Mission Act. And so how we define that now is if they're 70% service connected. So if they're 70% or more service connected, that meets that criteria for serious injury. So veteran, serious injury, part 2. And then the individual, we've got this breaks down in a couple of different ways, but the individual must be in need of personal care services for a minimum of 6 months based on any one of the following. So 6 months prior to applying, it's got to show some consistency there. There's got to be an inability to perform an activity of a daily living, a need for supervision protection based on symptoms or residuals of neurological or other impairment or injury, or a need for extensive instruction or supervision without which the ability to the veteran to function in daily life would be seriously impaired. So, there's lots of different issues or maladies that could fit into those different categories when we look at hospice and palliative care. And then number 4, this is just kind of a basic one that they put in there. It's the best interest of the individual to participate in the program. And so at times they may need a higher care setting or something like that, and it may be in a better location for them to be served somewhere else, or the caregiver who's at home with them can just possibly not be able to provide the level of care that they need. So at times we have to evaluate that. And then personal care services that would be provided by the family caregiver will not be simultaneously and regularly provided by or through another entity. And so one thing that our caregivers, and I'll talk more about this as we go on, they do have access to respite. So we want to support them as much as possible, but we just don't want to duplicate services in totality. And then the individual receives care at home or will do so if the VA designates a family caregiver. So they would be at home and not in an institutional setting or something along those lines. And then the individual just really engaged with a VA on a regular basis through their primary care team. So that is really the basic eligibility requirements for PCAFC. We always get complicated cases come through that we look at and dig through, but just for very kind of on that basic forefront, a veteran and then 70% service connected. Those are the two, for the two first criteria that we look at when individuals come into the program. And then it gets a little bit more complex from there as we move on down. So next slide. All right, and so I talked a little bit about this, but I just want to go over it again. We've already talked about the ADLs. And so we get a lot of questions in this component about IADLs. Well, do IADLs count? They don't count for this, but sometimes when people talk about IADLs, this happened the other day when I was meeting with a caregiver during a listening session. She was describing some IADLs, but when we really talked about it, it looked like she would kind of meet under the secondary criteria of the program for supervision, protection, or instruction. And so that's where a lot of our veterans that have mental health concerns or even dementia, things along some of those end of life issues that many of you work with could possibly fit under that supervision, protection, or instruction category as they move forward. So once again, and we recently underwent a court case, and so that reverted us back to statute language as opposed to regulation language. Our regulation language around supervision, protection, or instruction was a little bit more strict, and so the new language that is, or the statute language that is now used has allowed for a little bit more flexibility in terms of getting veterans and caregivers into the program. So once again, just to go over those, that we call it SPI, that SPI criteria. Sometimes it's SPIS, you'll hear that said too, but they would need supervision or protection based on symptoms or residuals of neurological or other impairment or injury. And then one more thing I just want to mention with ADLs that we look closely at, and we're evaluating this right now, but it really requires hands-on assistance every time they complete the ADLs. So bathing, toileting, the list goes on and on. Really, that hands-on assistance is what we look at every time they complete when they're in the program. And then one thing that we really just look at as we move forward is just how it impacts their overall functioning in daily life. So where would they be without that assistance on a regular basis? Next slide. And so I just want to talk a little bit about PCAFC services. So we've got a lot of education and training, and we do the majority of those in virtual formats, not all of them, but that is definitely a component of what we do with our caregivers. And so once again, Dr. Richardson, who's our executive director, myself, and some of our other associate directors have been out doing a fair amount of listening sessions with caregivers, with our staff, with veterans. And so we hear from that on a pretty regular basis on what's powerful for them and what's not. And so some of the services that we have under education and training is we have a program called Reach VA, different than the Reach program that is in mental health, the algorithm that identifies high-risk patients, totally different than that. So this is really focused on self-care and wellness courses. It's evidence-based training on just, how to really take care of yourself while being a positive caregiver. We see that quite a bit where people can just kind of lose themselves in caregiving. So while a really noble mission and an important thing, it's still important that they take care of themselves too. So a lot of our education and training focuses on that. And as I said before, a lot of that is virtual, although we are pushing to do more and more in-person, face-to-face throughout the country. So if you don't have that at your local facility now, that should be coming in the near future as we move forward. We have enhanced respite care. And so in PCAFC, if an individual is in need of respite care, they don't have the same limitations that many of our veterans do. So when it comes to enhanced respite care, we really offer respite care based on their clinical need as opposed to a cap of hours. So if they need somebody to come over 1 day a week so they can go to their medical appointments, or they can go to even like a book group or something like that, we offer that in the program, and we do that in partnership with geriatrics and extended care. So we have enhanced respite care in the program, which is different than your traditional respite care in the VA. But once again, this is for PCAFC, since we have two different programs. I'll talk about the other one later. Then we offer mental health counseling. And so Caregivers that are enrolled in PCAFC also have access to VA mental health counseling. I was a former service chief of mental health, and it was always difficult to get, even ongoing psychotherapy can be a struggle to get veterans in at times. And so that's been kind of an area we've seen at the program where we've struggled to get our caregivers into regular mental health counseling. So we are building hubs in the CRHs, the clinical resource hubs. We're building a specific psychotherapy hub that focuses on caregivers. So we're excited about that. That should be coming out in the near future as we roll that out. We also offer beneficiary travel. So if caregivers attend appointments with their veterans, then they do receive travel reimbursement as they go on that travel with their veterans, and then a monthly stipend. And so they'll receive a monthly stipend for the program too. So we have level 1 and level 2 stipends. Level 1, this is a ballpark here, but it's anywhere between $1,500 to $1,800 dollars per month, and then level 2 can be anywhere from $2,800 to $3,200-$3,300 a month. And so those are the 2 stipends, and different than a service connection, that money is paid directly to the caregiver. Next up, they also have access to CHAMP VA. And so, really we're big believers that their health has to be in good shape as they take care of their veterans. So if they don't have health insurance, they are eligible for CHAMP VA, and they can take part in that program and receive that. And then last but not least, this is a newer service that we're in the process of piloting right now, but will roll out nationally in the near future, is financial planning and legal resources for our caregivers enrolled in PCAFC. So just a brief summary of that. We've got a partner organization that we've got a contract with. And so they provide legal resources in terms of some of the issues that I'm sure many of your veterans and families face. Power of attorney, living wills, things along those lines. They can assist with that process. And then for many of our younger caregivers and younger veterans, and really, I should say probably across the spectrum, but I guess we see more demand in that population, some assistance with financial planning as they move forward, especially with many of ours with young children too. Next slide. And so there's a few different ways to apply for PCAFC, and I won't go on too long on this, but I just want to highlight our quickest and most efficient way to do it is just to apply online. If caregivers and their veterans can get in, it's a joint application, can apply online. Those ones come directly to us. We're able to process them very quickly and turn those around. And I would say, I think last time I checked, I think 85% of our applications come in through our online portal, which is great. That's the easiest way to do it. If for some reason a veteran or caregiver are not comfortable with that, they can print out the form right here, the link there. And this is all on our website, vacaregiver.gov, va.caregiver.gov. And we can assist with, and they can also print this form out from there. And then they can mail it in, and it'll navigate its way through the VA mailroom and make its way to us, and we will process that. Or they can walk it in to their local medical center, and we can also get that. So a couple of different options there. But once again, we really do encourage folks to apply online, caregivers and veterans to apply online. That's really the quickest and most efficient way. Next slide. So this is an area that we're really focusing on over the coming year. Typically, we only hear people talk about the program that I just spoke about, PCAFC. But we have another program under caregiver support. And so we're really trying to start looking at it as just one big program, PCAFC, PGCSS, because they really work hand in hand as they move forward. But this program is called our Program of General Caregiver Support Services. Once again, acronym PGCSS is what we call this. But for PGCSS, this is for caregivers and veterans of all eras and of any service connection. So you don't have to meet that 70% threshold to participate in this program. And so we've expanded this program. We've gotten a lot of good feedback on this program from our veterans and caregivers. It's just not as widely known as PCAFC, probably due to the financial component, but also there's been a lot of changes in PCAFC over time, but that's really stabilizing right now with our expansions, and we're able to focus on PGCSS. So I'll talk a little bit about this. I think possibly saw a question pop up in the chat. What about veterans that are less than 70%, but I know we'll get to some of those questions later. But In PGCSS, we provide one-on-one coaching and support. And so we have a whole health coaching model specifically designed for caregivers that we use. And once again, that's one-on-one. We have some other coaching that we can use for caregivers that's done through our REACH program. We do a lot of group support. I was just at a listening session the other day with our caregivers, and it was we were in Phoenix, and it was a group of caregivers, and they were all together. And I'm sure many of you have seen this too, but just sharing resources and connecting, and just really powerful to see that shared lived experience as they deal with various challenges that come up through their caregiving journey. So we see that group support as really powerful and really important, and so that can be done. We have some really structured groups that focus on certain topics. We have some open support groups that are more discussion based. And once again, we have a lot of virtual options, and then we have a lot of in-person options too. And we're really working to expand our in-person options right now, although virtual will always be a really important component of our program. And then we have tons of skills training just around caregiving. We're expanding that. We're doing more and more work around our skills training, but a lot of stuff on stress management. We have yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong, the list goes on and on. Trying to think of others off the top of my head, but just really a skills-based training on caregiving. We have a peer support mentoring program, different than your traditional, I don't know if I should say traditional, but I think when you think of peer support in the VA, you think of mental health or social work service where it's hired on peer support specialists that assist other veterans in their recovery journey. This one's a little bit different because it's a peer support mentoring program. So it's caregivers that are farther along in their caregiving journey just do this as to kind of give back. And it's not like a paid position or anything like that, but we do have a peer support mentoring program. We have lots of different mobile support options, and then we do a lot of resource connection and resource guidance to caregivers also. Once again, criteria for this: veteran must be enrolled in VA healthcare, need assistance with activities of daily living, or require supervision, protection, or instruction, and they're eligible. So there's not that 70% threshold, and there's no formal application. They can be referred over by their primary care. They can just walk in and ask to be enrolled in the program. And then on our website, there's a locator for each program. There's also, I'll talk about this later, but we have a caregiver support line. They can also call those options and get involved in the program too. So some different ways to get involved there, but no formal application, unlike PCAFC, which does have the formal application. Next slide. So once again, this is just really an illustration of what I talked about: intake, enrollment, benefits, and services. And so when you look at PCAFC, that's a little bit of a longer process to get into the program. And that's because, once again, with the financial components attached, they'll go through some different assessments, and then they'll eventually go to a team at the VISN who will look and make a kind of a yay or nay determination decision. With PGCSS, though, we can get them right in. So there's no wait. Or not a long wait. They should be able to enroll pretty quickly and then start getting those services right away. So, I typically encourage, if caregivers and veterans are applying to the program, there's no reason you can't do both programs, especially while you're in the program. Eventually, if you get into PCFC, you transition over, but sometimes that can take up to 90 days. The majority, I think 97% of our applications are turned around in 90 days. So the decisions are made pretty quickly. But nevertheless, if you start in PGCSS or your caregiver starts in PGCSS right away, we can start getting you some of those services: the one-on-one coaching, the group support, all the access to the online platforms. One of our most popular services, which is funny, but it's called AnyText. And so the VA has different components of texting programs, but this one is just texts our caregivers on a regular basis and gives them words of encouragement or positive sayings and stuff like that on our caregivers. It's funny, it's like one of our most popular programs. So that's another example of something that they can just get enrolled in right away as they move into the program. And so, as I said before, they take advantage of this. We can get them into the one-on-one coaching, into really learning about their benefits, how to access respite, things along those lines, and plugged into that supportive care that so many of our caregivers need, as they're so easy to get overwhelmed during that caregiving journey. Next slide. All right. And so once again, many of the things that we've talked about, but I haven't mentioned this. I want to talk a little bit about this. PGCSS participants, like many caregivers in the VA, have access to respite services. And so not the same respite services that PCAFC has. PCAFC's got a little bit more, once again, they don't really have a cap on respite. And so PGCSS caregivers would have that traditional cap. But once again, still a great service, and helps when you have people that can help you navigate that process, so they are able to do this. We are able to do so with PCAFC. Into caregivers in that program can just go get mental health counseling for their needs, but with PGCSS, if there's individual counseling needs related to the care of the veteran and to their caregiving, it's possible that they access that. And then skills training focused on caregiving for veterans' unique needs, as I talked a little bit about that skill training earlier. And then once again, we can do it in person, online, or via telehealth sessions. And we have some online programs. I hear this frequently. Some of our stations do offer extended hours, but we also, many of our online platforms, caregivers can access at any time. And so if they take advantage of that, then they're able to, if they're working or something like that, then they can look at it at a later time, or they have a lot of duties with young children. So that's a request that we get on a regular basis. Next slide. All right, and then we have our, as I talked a little bit about clinical support earlier, so I won't go over all of that again, but I do want to highlight one of our services here. And so we have a caregiver support line, very similar to to the suicide prevention line. And so this is the number right here, 1-855-260-3274. And so that is staffed Monday through Saturday. I believe it's 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And so caregivers, people with questions, individuals, even if you have somebody in your office and maybe you can't reach somebody locally, or they're with a patient, they can always call this number. You could call with them. We also do some just supportive counseling, so resource allocation, but also a lot of supportive counseling. Just if the caregiver is having a tough day and they want to talk to somebody, they can call this number and get that need met. So we do have our caregiver support line, and then on Sunday it's 8 to 5. So those are some options, and then they connect, very similar to the Veterans Crisis Line, they can connect the caregiver to somebody at their local facility to get enrolled in services. So once again, that's a great advantage. That's another great service that our caregivers can take advantage of. Next slide. Every year we hold Caregiver and Family Resource Fair. I'm sure all of you are familiar with this, but every single VA in terms of community partners is different. And so we've got some areas that have really great respite support, really great external support for caregivers. And we have other areas, maybe more rural, where it's more limited. So one thing that we hold every year is our Caregiver and Family Resource Fair, with the hopes of having caregivers come, having community partners come, and really meet each other, get plugged into those various resources as we move forward. And then, and that's an annual event that happens. And so I said, it's, we'll have VBA there too, local organizations, community organizations, and of course our VHA staff and our caregivers. So we do that on an annual basis within the program, sometimes a variation of that more frequently. Next slide. And then, as I said before, oh, look, I was wrong on the hours. Actually, I'm glad we did this. I forgot they extended it. So Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern, and Saturday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Once again, they can call that at any time. Anybody can call that. It doesn't have to just be the caregiver, family members, friends. If people want information about the program, they can call that line and get that. That is in Canandaigua, New York, and we staff it on a regular basis. So that's another option for folks if they need that. And once again, if caregivers are having a tough day, we've got some people that they don't even want to be involved in the program, but they just enjoy taking, calling and speaking to them once in a while on a tough day. That's totally acceptable with us. Very flexible when it comes to the caregiver support line. So staffed with social workers traditionally, although we have some social service assistants in that program too, but there to answer phone calls and support. So Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 10 p.m., Saturday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., and closed on Sunday. I apologize for giving the wrong information on the previous slide. Next slide. All right, and I think that is it. So sorry for running a little bit short, but I know we got a lot of questions in the chat, so maybe I can take some of those. Emily or Catherine, do
Yeah.
you want to feed some of those to me, and I'll do the very best I can to answer them?
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much, Tim, for
Yeah.
a wonderful presentation. It was wonderful. The chat box was lighting up. So one of the first questions is, what percentage of veterans would qualify for the VA Caregiver Support Program?
You know, I don't know what the number is. I guess the question is like, what number of veterans are 70% and then would qualify from, I don't have that number off the top of my head. I wish I did. Right now, I would say, just to kind of tell you a little bit about where we're at, we're coming up on 50,000 caregivers in the program right now. We have 45,000 veterans, 50,000 caregivers. The reason we have more caregivers in the program, and that's just PCFC, the reason we have more caregivers in the program is because some veterans have a primary and a secondary. So that is where we're at with the program right now. So hopefully that's helpful in terms of that. I don't know off the top of my head how many would qualify just in totality for the program. So that's difficult to estimate because it's based on a clinical decision as we look at the medical records and just the assessments that caregivers and veterans go through.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Another question came in. If someone served in the National Guard, do they qualify for the Caregiver Support Program?
They'd have to, so, if they served in the National Guard and they served in a combat zone and they're eligible for VA services, then they, and they're 70% service connected, then they are eligible for PCAFC. If they don't qualify for VA services, though, for VHA services, then they wouldn't be eligible for the program. So very similar to if they meet that criteria for VA, then they meet the criteria for us. Once again, if they have a caregiver that's supporting them, even if they're not 70% service connected, they can participate in PGCSS. They are 70% service connected and meet some of that other criteria, then they can participate in PCAFC. So very similar to VA standards for that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any, so if someone's on home-based hospice services, does that affect their benefits being enrolled in the VA Caregiver Support Program?
So one of our associate directors, Molly Snyder, in partnership with GAC, developed what's called a case mix tool. And so it's really meant to kind of make sure that they're not receiving duplicative services. So if they apply for the PCAFC program, they're in-home hospice, and maybe they're managing it on their own and they're doing a lot of it on their own, they could easily qualify for PCAFC and receive the full benefits of the program. If they're getting a lot of in-home services, they would only receive a portion of the services and stipend. So once again, they're told all of that before they're put in the program. And sometimes we'll present that to them at that last step of the process and say, hey, you may have to give, there may be some give and take in some certain areas. So we want to be able to share that with you. But once again, that's our case mix tool, and it was developed in partnership with GAC and the Caregiver Support Program.
Awesome. What type of time frame can families expect to process an application to enroll?
No, that's a great question. And so after phase 1 expansion, just due to that, once again, we had about 20,000 applications a year. Then all of a sudden, in a very short period of time, we went to 110,000 applications per year. So we had a little bit of a backlog, but we've worked through that backlog. We're not experiencing that with phase 2. And so right now, 97% of our applications are turned around in 90 days. So it's pretty quick. In terms of VA terms. So you don't see the waits that sometimes VBA's got much better with that too, but you don't see quite the waits that you see with VBA. So usually you'll get your decision in 90 days, a little bit different in various locations. But as I said before, nationally, if I'm just going to give you one kind of snapshot, 97% of our applications are turned around in that 90-day time period.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
Can I jump in real quick with a question sort of tied to that? I know we've had a few folks asking, is there a workaround for a veteran who is on hospice to either expedite the process or work around to not have to have a rating, but who are in need of support?
So the rating is written in our regulations. So there's no workaround. We could do PGCSS for them, where we could give them some services and support. And even if they apply, we would look to explore other services that they may be eligible, such as, I don't know, homemaker home health services, the list goes on and on. But I will say this, in terms of we do, if somebody's on hospice, we do expedite those. So it's noted typically on the application. You could also reach out to your local caregiver team and say, hey, this family just applied, or this, we call them dyads, but it's the caregiver and the veteran just applied. Can you please expedite this? And we do have a process to turn those around quickly. So we do that on a regular basis. We just had one a couple days ago where they got through the whole process in like 4 days, even though it's a lengthy process. And so not that it always happens that quickly, but that time it did. So let us know if it's on hospice. We want to get them into the program as soon as possible.
Yeah, another question that came in is if you can give us some examples of words of encouragement that you provide to caregivers, as well as what type of respite is offered to them.
Yeah, that's a great question. So words of encouragement that we provide our caregivers on a very regular basis. I think what they need to hear, or what at least a good component of them needs to hear, is that they're doing a great job, and that it's so important for them to take care of themselves during this time. As they give so much for their veterans and for what they do. I've had somewhat of a personal caregiving experience over the last year. With my father was a caregiver for my mom on a very heavy basis, and I played somewhat of a secondary role. But we constantly needed to be reminded, like, listen, you're doing a great job, but you got to take some time for yourself. You've got to take care for yourself. You'll actually be a better caregiver if you're able to do that. And so I think that's one of the biggest things that we can do for our caregivers as they move forward, is encourage them, link them with resources, support them through that process, and just get them, encourage them to take advantage of that, letting them know that you're doing amazing stuff, you're doing amazing work, but everybody needs some support of their own during that time. So thanks for what you do. But let's get you plugged in as much as we possibly can. So off the top of my head, that's typically some of the encouragement that we do. And then what was the other part of the question?
What type of respite is provided? Another question came in was, does adult day healthcare programs included in the respite?
Yeah, so in some components, once again, it's really a clinical decision in partnership with your PCAFC staff member. But yeah, we've seen that. We've seen adult day programs happen. We really want the caregiver to once again be able to just do basic stuff, go to their medical appointments, have some time with friends, visit. I was talking to a caregiver the other day. I was in Wichita actually, and this caregiver, her husband had dementia, and she's amazing, just amazing caregiver. She's actually in PGCSS, but every year she's really his full-time caregiver, and I think she's 80, he's like 84, but she's just really energetic. But she talked about, once a year she likes to go to Colorado and visit her grandkids, and spend a full week there. And so that's an example. So she needs that big chunk of respite, or that that time period of days in a row. And so that's an example of respite. I met with another caregiver the other day who just needed to get out of the house, like, once a week for a few hours. And so that's another example of a respite that we supported her. And that could possibly be done through adult daycare. In this case, it wasn't, somebody came into the home, but adult daycare could be used for that as a possibility. So yeah, those are all different options within the program.
Awesome, thank you. Catherine, do you see any other questions in the chat box or Q&A for Tim?
Yeah, actually a few came in. For the caregiving program, do we need a consult, or what does that look like?
So if they're going to go into PGCSS,
Mhm.
and once again, that is the non-stipend program, but you still get a ton of supports. That could be a phone call. There is a consult for that primary care could put in, and we'll reach out and contact them. But the quickest way is probably just to call the local caregiver support coordinator or call the caregiver support line. Let them know you're interested in PGCSS. PCAFC is an application-based program, and so there's not a consult for that. What they would do, and this is probably the quickest way to do it, would be to get online and fill out that application. So that's really the quickest way for PCAFC.
Got it. Another one, does the caregiver need to live with the veteran to qualify for the comprehensive program? Also, does being on this program disqualify someone from aid and attendance or from VA paid home care?
Yeah, both great questions. So a couple of things as we really look at that. So once again, back to the case mix tool, we'd have to look to make sure that duplication wasn't happening. So it's not, there's not really a hard and fast rule for that, but there's the case mix tool that determines, to make sure that there's not a duplication of services. And then what was the first part of that question?
Oh, sorry, I'm scrolling back up. Does the caregiver need to live with the veteran?
No, that's a great question. And we get that all the time. And look, this one area that I would look at possibly making some adjustments to. But as of right now, if it's a family member, they do not have to live. Like a family member does not have to live with the veteran, son, daughter, spouse, typically the spouse does, but mother, father, they do not have to live with the veteran. If it's a family friend, they do have to live with the veteran. So once again, that's something that not a family member, they do have to live with them. So that's something that we're looking at right now. As we kind of take we're calling it a broad and comprehensive review of the program, but that's something we're exploring.
So does extended family count as that? Like, for example, if there was a cousin, or is it just immediate?
It's the nuclear family. So
okay. Got a couple more. For caregivers receiving stipend that qualify for CSP respite, can they also use the 6-hour day, 30 days a year respite services on top of the CSP respite?
If they're in PCAFC, there's a lot of flexibility with respite where they could use more than just that initial allotment. If they're in PGCSS, it's just really the traditional caregiver, or not caregiver, but respite allotment. So yes, PCAFC flexibility, clinical, based on clinical need, we do have people that go over that and that, or use it in a different manner. So PCAFC, yes, PGCSS, more of a hard and fast rule.
Okay, does the need for care have to be directly related to the service-related injury? For example, if a veteran has a 70% plus service-related injury, but the need for care to meet ADLs is related to another terminal diagnosis, would that factor into their eligibility?
So the old program, you used to have to tie it to the service. So that was tough. It was just tough to determine that. So that's a really positive, in my opinion, a really positive change that they made when they rewrote some of the regulations in 2018 that were enacted in 2020, is that as long as they're 70% service connected, and let's say they develop dementia, totally unrelated to their service, they're still eligible for the program and they can still meet criteria.
Okay, got it.
Did that answer that? Did I get everything on that one? Yeah.
Yeah. Another one who is sharing that at their main clinic, it's impossible to reach the caregiver support network. Is there anything else the family can do if they've submitted an application but cannot get in touch with the clinic, as hospice is so time limited?
So wait, ask me that one again.
So someone is mentioning that at their main clinic, it's impossible to reach the caregiver support. Is there anything else the family can do if they submit an application but cannot get in touch with the clinic, as hospice is time limited?
We can follow up. I mean, they could call the caregiver support line and get an update, but I'd really love to know about that case. So if you could send that to me and I could zoom in on that specific clinic to find out where the delays are at, we'd really like to be able to help them work through that, because especially on hospice, they should not be waiting at all for that product. They should be moving through very quickly.
Thank you.
And it looks like Allison, can you shoot me a quick email if encrypted with the caregivers and last names, and I'll reach out. I know the program manager there, so we'll reach out and I'll do some test phone calls on my own to see what the response is like.
Someone asked, where can you find information on VA paid home care?
That's a broad question, and I don't know if I can answer, but I'll do my very best. So if you have questions on the caregiver program, you can go to va.caregiver.gov. For VA, I mean, there's so many different, sometimes it's overwhelming, the number of options. I would talk with your social work service on site. You could also reach out to your if you have a true geriatrics and extended care service. There's somebody in there who could really help you with that process. But for caregiver, it'd be www.caregiver.va.gov, or you could call the caregiver support line. But if it's specific, and that's the thing, the VA relies so heavily on community organizations for homemaker home health services and other in-home services. It's different based on every location, fortunately and unfortunately. So I would once again reach out to your local social work service and see if they can guide you on that, or your local geriatrics and extended care service, and see what type of information they can give you.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, I think we have one more. I'm a social worker in hospice and often have veterans who have never signed up for the VA or received a rating and are terminally ill, bedbound, etc., and cannot undergo the process for getting a rating. Family caregiving often wants to utilize VA caregiver benefits, but there's no way. Plus the length of time to get the veteran enrolled. Is there anything else that can help with this, or any other options that you could maybe share?
So are they eligible for the VA at all or not? Or are they saying they're not eligible for the VA?
The question just got deleted.
They have never signed up for the VA. Okay, so
Never signed up.
Yeah, we're unable to, kind of supersede the specific requirements of VA eligibility. We are unable to do that. Once again, if they're not service connected, but they are able to get into the VA, we can utilize PGCSS for them. The other things that our PGCSS staff can do is help them get connected with community resources. So our PGCSS staff should be really connected with the various respite services and things along those lines in the facility. So please let us know. Please reach out to your local PGCSS staff member. All of those contacts are listed on our website. You can also call the CSL, and we can work to help you find some of those. So not the ideal answer. I wish I could say like, hey, we can get them into one of our programs immediately, but there are those regulations and statutes surrounding VA eligibility.
Got it. Okay. Unless I'm missing something, I'm not seeing any other questions. I am saying the resources in these programs are inspirational, empowering. Someone else thanking you for your time and for sharing all of this great information. Last call for questions. Feedback, comments.
Just if I can just say one thing, hospice and palliative care, just always such a unique calling, but always amazes me the work that our caregivers do, or that are not our caregivers. Gosh, I'm totally focused on caregivers, that our staff do in relation to support our veterans through this process. So I remember being like a young social work intern in the VA and coming to we had an in-station hospice unit, and it was just touching the way that the staff treated them. So thank you for all you do in hospice, in palliative care. No, obviously two different things, but just at such a critical time for our veterans, our caregivers when they reach that stage of life. And it's huge to see all of you walk them through it. So thank you for that on a very, just really appreciate that from behalf of the program.
Yeah, a lot of other thank yous. Thank you for the information. Thank you for sharing. I know that when we ask folks, what are some resources or more information on benefits that you would like to hear more of? VA caregiving was actually at the tippy top of the list. So thank you for sharing this. Again, the slides and recording will be available on the website. Any other information that comes down the pipeline, of course, will also be shared on the We Honor Veterans Resource Library, and we will keep you all posted on anything else coming at. But yes, again, in the meantime, if you have questions, if you ever have trouble connecting, please reach out to us and we will put you in touch with the correct person and get some answers for you and get you connected. So thank you again for your time, Tim, and have a great afternoon, everyone.
Yeah, and open door, thanks for having me on. Open door policy. Also, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me too, and we can get you connected as soon as possible. Thanks so much. Take care.
Thank you.